Chinese people. So an affirmation of the idea of the unified Chinese nation-state hardly begins to address the question of the imagined community taking shape across the diverse landscape that was China. Nor does it answer questions about the discrepancy between individual biographies of displacement and the national master narrative of the continuation of the Chinese nation-state. Ultimately, it raises this question about the purpose of historical knowledge and about the subject of modern Chinese historical narrative. That is, for whom do we write the history of China's revolution? And what does it have to do with the Chinese understanding of its modernity on an everyday basis at the street level? So that was my question number 2. And then my question number 3, or reaction number 3, in response to the most recent scholarship, draws from Professor Wang Gengwu's keynote speech that's in one of these volumes that you will be reading, or in one of these volumes which are being launched today. In Professor Wang's keynote speech about Sun Yat-sen and the 1911 revolution, he characterized Sun Yat-sen as the very first modern Chinese political leader. And the reasons that he gave included 2 things. One, Sun Yat-sen was somebody who thought independently in response to a sense of crisis in the old world. And he thought independently, drawing from a variety of sources for his intellectual vision. So that was the first point. Sun Yat-sen started out with an English education and acquired his Chinese literacy thereafter, and he was open and receptive to all kinds of cultural resources. A second point made by Professor Wang Gengwu was that Sun Yat-sen, in terms of his political activities, was able to operate outside of the established structure of the gentry elite and the Confucian bureaucracy. In other words, he was a pioneering figure who not only carved out a new sphere of action for politics, he was the sort of person who was able to conjure up political power from sources where power did not used to reside. It was for the combination of these 2 reasons that Professor Wang Gengwu regarded Sun Yat-sen as the first modern Chinese political leader and not simply a thinker. So if we think about this, if we take that as the model of Chinese modernity and then also connect Professor Wang's image of Sun Yat-sen to, for instance, this very site where we are today, which was dedicated this morning, and the opening of the park and the site marks this occasion. What do we make of the connection between this place and this character, Sun Yat-sen? Well, I have no supreme wisdom to share in that regard, other than to share with you my reading of a novel by the English novelist A.Y. Byatt. It's called Possession. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with that book. In some ways, the book Possession, which is a Victorian romance, opened up the whole issue of what possession or inheritance, either one of those, actually constitutes us. For if we were to entrust the past to memory, memories can be lost. Memories are faulty. And then, as we know, in the case of the 1911 revolution, historical interpretations can be changed. A person's reputation can be changed. And people move on. New sets of considerations would displace those of the old. So what is it there in our 21st century, our digital era, for instance, for us to inherit from the bygone days of Sun Yat-sen and what he might have meant for this place? I suppose, drawing from Professor Wang's remarks, one could say, or I would suggest, that to possess the Sun Yat-sen's legacy, it's not about ownership of a thing that's out there. It's certainly not about ownership of a building in which he happened to have occupied. It was perhaps more to the point about retracing his footsteps, about making sense of his sense of crisis, his willingness to think beyond the box, and his ability to bring forth power or presence where there had been none. In other words, it's about somebody like Sun Yat-sen who is able to thrive in the midst of contradiction. This is a man who is not fearful of self-contradiction, nor is he ever without contradiction. This is a man who made friends among strangers, and who even in his lowest days, when he cannot refer to any piece of land as his own, that he had the courage, the vision, and then in the end the durability to conjure up the image of a Chinese nation, of people, of those three principles, of people's livelihood, of people's power, and of a nation of Chinese subjectivity. So, thank you. I would wrap up my English remarks on that note.